Welcome to the Wager Talk College Basketball Tip-Off Show. I am joined by my good friend Drew Martin, Joe Raineri. A conflict in schedule today. We'll be working out his schedule to moving forward, but we wanted to touch bases since the show is dark Thursday or Friday. Just do a quick show for you today on Monday. Again, Drew joining me. We'll talk about a couple of the top games for today. But Drew, as we always do, let's go ahead and break down this past weekend. Let's look at the biggest upsets. On Saturday and Sunday. On Saturday, you see there were 25 upsets by dogs of 2.5 or more. On Sunday, 6 upsets by dogs of 2.5 or more. Leading the way on Saturday, Georgetown with their upset of Butler, an 11.5 point dog. And on Sunday, Illinois-Chicago. That was the most surprising score to me. Illinois-Chicago blowing away Northern Kentucky. They basically had a 20-point lead from the 10-minute mark on. Any huge surprises for you this past weekend, Drew?
I guess I would run with that. What you said, 25 dogs of 2.5 or more. That's kind of. I'd like to compare that to past Saturdays in the past, Ralph. I mean, would that even be a big number? You think, or is that just kind of about right?
Well, we saw 37 on one Monday. I remember doing the sheet. There was 37 upsets, but that was closer in January where, we didn't have that good of a feel as we started to play conference schedules.
Right.
So this number is a pretty decent number. And I remember doing the sheet this morning. There were probably another 10 or 12 games that dogs of 1, 1.5, or 2 points also won, but didn't cover. So, we talk about it often, Drew. If there's a game you really like that's an underdog, it's okay to take part of your bet and sprinkle something on the money line to get that bigger payoff. Any nice dogs for you this weekend that went outright?
For me personally, unfortunately, no, Ralph. But just kind of looking off the sheet here, what we got, that Iowa-Minnesota game, that kind of jumped off at me a little bit. I mean, Iowa is a team I haven't been able to kind of square in terms of when I'm betting on them, they're cashing it, and when I'm fading them, not so much. But just an Iowa team that I feel like is really up and down. So that Minnesota game on Saturday was a little bit eye-opening for me, Ralph.
It's a game I was on the wrong side of, Drew. Iowa has played so well at home with their elite offense, but they've really struggled on the road. I obviously was following the game close as one of my plays. Minnesota actually got up 6 with about 3 minutes to go, and Iowa came back and went on a 7-0 run and took the lead, and from then on out, it was over. Obviously, the defense did their job. Some of the biggest covers this weekend. A game we're going to talk about, a team we're going to talk about is Iowa State without Halliburton. What do they do? Well, all they do is they host Texas and they win 81-52, covering by 26 points. Cal State Fullerton and Cal Poly, when we're looking at the top over-under on Saturday, you will notice a 68-point over in that game, but you'll also notice the 4 asterisks, meaning there were 4 overtimes in that game, where they basically played 3 full halves of basketball to get to that point. And then Townsend, James Madison, the top under total on Saturday, 39.5 points. And then again on Sunday, Illinois-Chicago, a 40-point cover against Northern Kentucky. Drake and Evansville, a 27-point over. And the top under, a game we just mentioned, Iowa and Minnesota went under by 36 points. And lastly, over the weekend, let's look at some of those top performers. And, I take these top performers, from a site I really like, and that's Sports Reference. And, it's not based on how many points they score, but they're ranked on a formula of points, rebounds, assists, steals, and blocks. We see Diallo from Providence. They beat Seton Hall, a huge win. 35 points and 10 rebounds in only 31 minutes. On Sunday, the list, Dexter Dennis from Wichita State, they had a big offensive performance. And San Diego State, Malachi Flynn, 22 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists, 3 steals. And that San Diego State team, just an awesome, awesome bunch. Drew, we have a very short card. There's only 4 regularly lined added games. Anything from those added games where the lines have moved at all?
Yeah, we got a couple here actually. Kind of short card, like you said, but what right at the top of the card here? First game up, 7 o'clock Eastern, 4 o'clock Pacific tip here. This North Carolina Central, North Carolina A&T, two teams that I'm not exactly, too into regional rivalries with, but I'm sure that North Carolina Central, North Carolina A&T, it sounds like there might be a rivalry there, Ralph, and I'll tell you, people are liking this over. It opened 131 up to as high as 135.5 at Westgate and also offshore at Chris. So getting some heavy over money in that one, Ralph. We also got a couple more here. Mississippi Valley State, that one 153 down to 151. Oh, Arkansas Pine Bluff, Alcorn State to another off the board here, a little bit limited in terms of how much you can bet on them. But 125, the opener, up to 129.5. So some over money in some of these kind of off the board games here, Ralph.
Of course, those are the MEAC and the SWAC, the two conferences that some places don't have lines on, some are limited. That North Carolina Central and North Carolina AT&T, they're basically playing for the MEAC title, Drew. Norfolk State is 8-2, North Carolina Central 8-2, North Carolina AT&T 8-3. So they are two of the best three teams in the MEAC, and the loser very well could be eliminated here from the title. So interesting that it's an under. A lot of times when we get to this point and we have the top teams in the conference, you think about defense is the thing that stands out to me. But again, I don't normally follow the MEAC, and we'll see how that goes. A couple trends and angles. Again, these are from some of the more limited games, but we'll run down the numbers. Bucknell is now 3-14 ATS on the road, their last 17 games. They're also 1-12-1 over under their last 14 games. So if you're thinking Bucknell, guys, think fade Bucknell, and you think the under when you're looking at them. Notre Dame, I actually don't agree with Notre Dame tonight. I like the opposite side, but I need to mention that the Irish are 13-3 against the spread their last 16 games. That North Carolina AT&T team you mentioned, Drew, 9-1 against the spread their last 10 at home. And Idaho's now covered 6 straight. They have a big revenge game tonight, getting 10 points in theirs. Last one, Xavier, 2-10-1 over under their last 13 games. Drew, when we're talking about those team angles, those team situational ATS or over under angles, those are team specific. And basically it's just looking at how a team is performing. I do have a situation, though, or let's call it system. And this system play, let me ask you this. And I think, it surprised me at this number, so obviously I'm giving you a little clue. If you have a favorite tonight of 3 or more, okay, so you have a favorite of 3 or more, and in that last game, that favorite lost as a home favorite, and the team they're playing tonight won as an away dog. So it's pretty simple. The favorite tonight lost as a home favorite. The opponent won as an away dog.
The team that is off the loss, to put it the most simply, I would say is a money maker.
I would agree with you. You're talking about a team that lost as a better team.
Right.
Is the favorite and is the better team today against an opponent that pulled the upset.
Correct. That's what I'm
going through the last 3 years, though. It's been a 37.1% situation.
Wow.
So it's actually a 63% play against. So again, this is just something we want our viewers to pay attention to, because we fall into those scenarios. Oh, this team lost as a favorite. They're not going to lose again as a favorite. This team's off an upset win. They're not going to win again. But again, the body size isn't huge. There's only been 70 games in the last 3 years that have fallen in that category. But again, that's a 63% play against, and we will be able to watch it tonight. Portland State is playing Idaho. Portland State is laying 10.5 points. Portland State is off an upset loss to Eastern Washington. Ironically, Idaho was off an upset win against Eastern Washington. Idaho played midweek. Portland State hasn't played since last week. So this system, again, for what it's worth, if you believe the parameters of it, it would say a 63% play on Idaho plus the 10.5 against Portland State.
I like it, Ralph. How about them Vandals tonight, man? And a true degenerate special, man. You're talking late night action on the West Coast here, standalone. Vandals plus as high as 11 right now might be the play with Ralph's system.
Now, I will say this. Let's throw another interesting trend into this. Back on January the 2nd, Portland State was actually Idaho beat Portland State 72-61. So Portland State also 11? Has revenge. Yeah. Wow.
So it's that system. And they've already beat them, and they're now catching 11. This is a weird matchup. I mean, those are kind of contradicting stats there that I don't think we would see a lot.
It is, and again, I would have guessed with you, Drew. There's no question, but that's why if you follow me on Twitter at CalSportsLV, that's why I like running the scenarios and sharing them, because it teaches you not to fall into those old premises or things that you're accustomed to hearing, or the team that loses can't lose twice or can't lose 3 in a row or can't lose 4 in a row, and run the numbers and get to know what the real numbers are moving forward. So, Drew, again, as we said, a very light card. We're not going to go through the dogs. There's a couple games I want to talk about just because it's the big Monday TV games, and the first is any thought for you on Kansas and Iowa State? We know that Halliburton was by far their best player. I will say this, against Texas, they looked very good, but the Longhorns were without 3 of their frontline players, including their top 2 offensive line players. So my take coming out of Sunday is this. I think there's actually value on Kansas because Iowa State comes in a little overrated off that loss, where perhaps people thought they're going to be okay without Halliburton. I think they were at home catching a team that was more banged up than with them, and I'm looking to fade them continuing on from this point. Your thoughts on Iowa State, Kansas? Kansas 16 or 16.5, a total of 140.5.
Yeah, this is an Iowa State team. I mean, they've lost, 5 of their last 7 games here, Ralph. And talking about, what sports bettors, what I always try to find is change. And Iowa State, I mean, this is exhibit 1 in terms of a guy that ran the point a lot. Their best player, Halliburton, likely playing in his last college basketball game. He's likely heading to the association. Of course, that's up for grabs next year. But the Cyclones going up against Kansas, which, depending what numbers you want to go off of, Ralph, arguably the number 1 efficient defense in the country. I just think Iowa State's really up against it offensively. I mean, if you can find team totals out there, I would be all over this Iowa State under. I like the game total under. I like Kansas. I like where you're going with this. Kansas is at home, and I just don't think this number is big enough. I mean, granted, Kansas struggles on the free throw line, which always worries me, but what the number is telling us, this isn't a 7-8 point range. I mean, we're up to 16 now. This is a Jayhawks team I would be all over. I like the favorite, and I like the under.
Drew, did they play earlier this year? Is this first meeting?
This is the second meeting, with Kansas winning 79-53 in the first one.
So that holds very true to Iowa State was at home in that first meeting. Halliburton was playing, and they scored 53. And if we break down this team total just by subtracting out and dividing, we're looking at a team total of 62 for Iowa State. So you're on the Cyclones under 62 if that's the number they could find for a team total?
Oh, I would love that. I mean, I personally... I don't know what the team totals would be. I don't have. I don't know if you recommend a book out there that would give you a college basketball total of this nature, Ralph. I'd love to hear it. But yeah, Halliburton played in 36 minutes the first time around, and 64 possessions and 53 points. So far less than a point per possession last time out. Now you're without your best player and you're on the road. This is going to get ugly for the Cyclones, in my opinion.
We'll have to put that in Derek Stevens' ear. So next time Kelly's talking to Derek or doing a video with him, that's something that you ask Circa when you get to this point in time on those big conference games. I think they're going to be the ones that jump out and be aggressive and be able to do something like that.
So you like what Circa's doing out there?
Yeah, I love that they're putting their name out there and they're standing by their numbers. Being able to get college football totals and college football lines Sunday at 1 o'clock Pacific, to me, is just awesome. We used to have, a couple years ago when I was at North Coast Sports and Phil Steele, totals didn't come out till Monday night or Tuesday. So, yes, I love them being out there, putting out those totals early. I love the yes-no options. So many times sports books list futures. Well, we know those futures have a 25% hold, but what Circa does is they offer you the futures and you can bet San Francisco to win the division, or you can bet no, they won't win the division. That makes their futures much stronger. That makes their futures much more bettable. When you have the yes and no, obviously the straddle in the middle on the bigger numbers I'm okay with, but I think Derek Stevens is going to be a force in the sportsbook industry moving forward, especially when Circa opens and they get the recognition they deserve.
I'm with you on the football, Ralph. Both sides and totals, they led the market, both offshore and Vegas. I thought that was really cool, especially the first year I've lived here for football season. And they were the first app that I opened up legally in Las Vegas, Ralph. But I'll tell you this, for college basketball, for whatever reason, we can't give them the same credit because they don't deserve it. They're not out there first side in total. Westgate is actually beating them to the punch almost each and every day. So I actually give big props to Westgate in terms of college basketball.
Well, no question. John Murray and the crew, that they do an awesome job there. And, I'm okay with, there's no allegiance, that it's us against them. It's right. We don't care where we're betting them. We're looking for the value, but having the opportunity to shop and bet into multiple places with the line still early, agree. The Superbook does a great job at what they do, and we're lucky to still have a few independents out there to make a difference. Circa, the Tony Miller at the Golden Nugget, and then I would add the South Point in there because the South Point being a 24-hour sports book, and they may not be the first, but they do have a lot of options, and they're not afraid to take local action, which, is something that we know some of these local sports books are afraid. When the numbers get too high, they back off and say, we'll pass on taking those bets from you.
Yeah, the 24-hour sports book that South Point has, I love it because I'm there sometimes doing a show and it will be 1 a.m., Ralph, and there'll be somebody there. You can go make a bet. I make bets actually at that time, and it's also interesting because if you're using it, Ralph, you could log into your account at 3 a.m. and make a bet. That's not always the case in the legal sports market, meaning they shut it down. Some of these apps. Come midnight, even before, sometimes you go in to make a bet, which is what I like to do as a sports bettor. Sometimes my hours are a little off, and sure enough, they're not taking bets. And I've found that interesting since moving to Vegas that I'm sure a lot of people out there don't realize.
Yeah, I think it's the corporate part of it. The Caesars and the MGMs that have multiple properties, they want to protect themselves and they want to make sure something doesn't happen overnight while they don't have a person in charge to be able to change lines. They don't want to get caught with their pants down per se. So, I look at it as them being a little careful, but agree with you. I'm more of that early person, Drew, where, you might be out to 1 or 2. I'm probably getting up at 4 or 5. So we're probably waving at each other driving down the I-15. But when I get up and I find something, I want to bet it right away. I don't want to wait till those markets change. One other quick game, Drew. Let's look at Xavier. Xavier, St. John's game tonight is in Madison Square Garden. St. John's lost the opener. Xavier won at home 75-67 back at January 5th. But the interesting thing is this. Quentin Gooden hasn't played point guard that much. He's made some changes. He puts Paul Scruggs in there lately. Quentin Gooden played the first game at point guard, and if you don't know St. John's, they are going to press you full court the entire game. That's why they're up-tempo, because they will absolutely press you. He went to a taller lineup with Scruggs, moved Gooden over, and, this is a little different now. So we have a point guard facing St. John's full court press for the first time. But then when you look at St. John's, we also know that Mustafa Heron did not play. He's not scheduled to play today. Although they beat Providence at home, I think it's going to be much more difficult for them tonight to take care of Xavier. I do lean with the Xavier side. Any thoughts on that game, Drew?
Mustafa Heron, the Auburn transfer, actually, he's a big loss for him. So if he's not playing, I'd really only look kind of one way, and that's to fade him. St. John's, I haven't had that great of a read. You're right. Kind of the hectic style of basketball, trying to create turnovers, full court press. One of the faster adjusted tempos, meaning offense and defense, in the country. Neither team really too good on the free throw line. It's just St. John's has not been good of late, Ralph. They've only got 3 wins in their last 10 games or so, 12 games actually. So it would be an Xavier pass for me. I'll likely be watching on the sidelines in this one, man.
We know how hard it is to change systems. St. John's went from their system. Mike Anderson comes over from Arkansas. So when you saw those Arkansas Havoc defenses, that's what he's trying to bring to St. John's. Although they're playing it, they haven't perfected it yet by any means. But anytime you have full court press and you're going to get full court press the whole time, you often get layups on the other side, hence their tempo. And the same on the defensive side. When they have the ball, they're going to press that pace. I passed today at Wager Talk, Drew. It is $9 Monday at both Wager Talk and Sports Memo. I would say that I do have a lean with North Carolina. They just played a horrible game against Duke. They're not going to play that bad again. I think you're looking at Duke as an elite team, and they took it out on North Carolina in their last game. I actually like North Carolina not only with the points tonight, but to win outright. It did not make my card as an official play, but boy, it was damn close. I just couldn't pull that final trigger. Any leans or a best bet if you have one for our guys today, Drew?
Sure, yeah, $9 Monday, got a play up. I really like it. Bet it heavy last night, and the number's still in bettable range now. So check that out, sportsmemo.com. $9 Monday, great that there at the website, Ralph. But I think I like your Vandals stat there, man. The Idaho Vandals and the True Degenerate Special plus the 11 at Portland State. To say there. And, heck, it's been fun betting Idaho in the Kibbe Dome in years past. So I might bring that over to the hardwood tonight, man.
Again, 3-0 as a road dog in this price range. 5-2 as a road dog of 6.5 or more. 8-4 on the road. So while the Vandals have struggled to get wins, they certainly have kept it close against their opponent. Again, $9 Monday, guys, Sports Memo and Wager Talk. Remember, on Tuesdays, we have $2 handicappers at both sites. Appreciate you joining us on the tip-off show for Monday. We'll be back in 23 hours. I'm Ralph Michaels. He is Drew Martin. And again, thank you for watching the Wager Talk tip-off show.
All right, thanks.